flow of ideas will be like this. We'll start off with some basic questions, move
Dr.
on to
Madhu,
choice
Dr.
of
Courtney
hormonal
is here.
therapies.
Madhu, Dr. Courtney.
I was told Dr. Courtney will not be available for the program.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And discuss a little about systemic agents. And considering that it's a radiation meeting, we'll have a detailed discussion on how to radiate primary and radiate secondaries. So just as a starter, I thought we'll discuss about an elderly man who presents with low urinary symptoms and a PSA of more than 100. The first question is to Dr. Courtney. I think I'll allow somebody else to take that. Would you ask for a repeat PSA for this patient, or would you just take more than 100 as a value? Dr. Vinay, maybe?
I would like to ask for a repeat PSA just to know the exact value of PSA rather than having a blanket statement of more than 100. So definitely I would ask for a repeat PSA.
Okay. How do you think a repeat PSA would help us, Dr. Vinay?
When we are evaluating, then probably having a PSA of an exact value would definitely make sense. And in terms of follow-up, then probably more than 100 could be anything. So having an exact value will really make sense when we treat a patient and when we follow up a patient.
That'll be good. That's fine, sir. Dr. Parthasarathy, what about the staging scans for a patient who has a more than 100 PSA? Hi, Dr. Parthasarathy, are you there? Okay, I'll pass on to Dr. Sanjukta only. Dr. Sanjukta, what would be the preferred staging scans?
Yeah, considering the elderly male and PSA of more than 100, I would like to go first MRI of the pelvis. And then to rule out any met disease, I will go for a PSMA PET scan.
You will go for a PSMA PET scan after that.
Yeah.
Okay. Considering that you have done an MRI pelvis, which possibly could have covered the upper abdomen also, don't you think a bone scan would also suffice, madam?
Yeah, bone scan will do, but what about your visceral mets? It will be better if you do PSMA scans.
Okay.
PET scans.
Okay, so we can all probably take PSMA scan as a single shot scan, or an MRI pelvis if at all done and covered the upper abdomen. We could just do away with the possibly one bone scan and then complete the staging.
Okay, that will be fine.
What do you think? Do you really need a biopsy in a patient who has a certain prostate malignancy on radiological imaging and a PSA of more than 100?
Yeah, I strongly recommend biopsy for this patient to know the different kinds of histopathological morphologies. Though adenocarcinoma is most common, to differentiate from other malignancies, I need that. And I need to know the Gleason score also, whether it is moderate risk or high risk patient.
Great. So we'll certainly need a biopsy. As has already been discussed, we need an exact value of PSA for a response evaluation, and a staging PSMA PET scan in whichever center it is available. I think PSMA PET scan is being used like left, right, and center these days. And a biopsy is must to know the variants of adenocarcinoma, and also, as has already been discussed, currently we also need to know in metastatic patients germline mutations like the HRRs, where we could possibly add olaparib as a combination to standard therapy at this point. We'll move on to the first case, and see, it's a 60-year-old male who went for a master health checkup. He had very soft lower urinary symptoms, which were insignificant, but he was found to have a PSA of more than 100. Ultrasound had a prostate enlarged, and a TRUS biopsy was done promptly by the urologist, reporting a adenocarcinoma Gleason 8. Patient was referred to an oncologist for further management. And PSMA PET scan revealed a large prostate with seminal vesicle involvement, internal iliac lymph nodes on the right, and two para-aortic lymph nodes of 2 centimeter in size with a fairly high SUV. The exact PSA value was 442 for this gentleman. I will ask Prahalad, so if you were to decide on hormonal management for this gentleman, what clinical information do you rightly need to decide on what hormones, Prahalad?
first of all, we would like to know what are his comorbidities.
Okay, comorbidities first, then.
And also at 60, we expect that he's most likely going to live for more than 5 to 10 years. His life expectancy is expected to be more than 5 years. So he's on board for even radiation at this point. Because
Okay,
it's oligometastatic disease.
great. What about, can you enumerate on what comorbidities you will be worried about?
Diabetes, hypertension, cardiac status, especially
Cardiac status.
LHRH agonists, we need to be worried about the cardiac status in particular.
Okay. And performance status by any chance?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
At
Okay.
60, he's come walking for a master health checkup. I assume that he should be absolutely fine.
And what about a financial status also, Prahlad?
It doesn't matter so much, I think, because he's a metastatic prostate cancer. Because orchidectomy is very economical.
No, I think whether or not it's metastatic, I think in prostate cancer, finances are going to be important with the wide range of options that are currently available. Maybe about 15 years back, we didn't have so many standards of care. We have multiple standards of care. So I think we should choose the best for this gentleman. He's a retired executive chairman of a private firm, so fairly well off. He has a cardiac disease and had a stent at 57 years of age, but his ejection fraction is good and performance is good. Diabetic with a fairly good control. Dr. Venkat, can you choose the right hormonal management for this gentleman who has a very soft LUTS and all these factors?
So as you said that we have actually a lot of options now for hormonal therapy. The options being we can have a bilateral orchidectomy, that is one surgical option. The other options being LHRH agonists, the other is LHRH antagonists. Okay. So as you said that there is a cardiac comorbidities for this particular patient and is also diabetic. We need to see that long-term cardiac movements are taken care of. And for him, when we compare this agonist versus antagonist, LHRH antagonist would be the best option for him because that will reduce his cardiac comorbidities in long term. And even bilateral orchidectomy would not be an option because that would also still increase the risk of cardiac comorbidities as equal as agonists. So I'll go for LHRH antagonists, Degarelix.
Okay, I think that answer is quite well taken. So for somebody who the advantages of using an agonist at this point is that, antagonist at this point is that you get a very good rapid fall of PSA, and also testosterone levels are achieved, lower testosterone levels are achieved at faster than an agonist. You don't need to prime them with anti-androgens before we start on the injections. Also, we have trials like the HERO trial and the PRONOUNCE, which I was actually mentioned that the cardiovascular risk is slightly lesser in terms of using Degarelix. But then I take the point that all three are equivalent in terms of efficacy. And in a patient with a very soft LUTS, I don't think we are in a hurry at all. We can always put him on bicalutamide and start him on LHRH agonist also.
Right. Okay. Those with those with impending urethral obstruction, they are the ones who are at the highest risk in this particular patient. Without bone metastasis, those with impending urethral obstruction or with the spinal cord
compression.
These are the ones whom we really need to prime with bicalutamide for. Otherwise, even just 10 to 14 days is good enough. In this patient, since it's soft LUTS, may not be so important.
Point taken, Prahlad. So how does a PSA drop actually impact survival? This is a SWOG trial which actually looked at the drop in PSA. So with somebody who has a very fairly the higher the drop, the higher is the survival. So coming to this person, he had 30 days of bicalutamide for safety's sake, and then had a gossamer injection 10.8, and his PSA at 6 weeks was 12.5. So he's not falling into that favorable risk as per the SWOG trial's previous scan. So Dr. Vinay, shall I ask you, do you give only a single blockade like only LHRH agonist, or you also do a combined androgen blockade in these patients?
I would always prefer to have a combined androgen blockage when it comes to treating a metastatic, oligometastatic CA prostate than having a monotherapy. So it's been proven, when we have CAPs, they have a better overall survival compared to monotherapy. So definitely consider CAB over monotherapy.
Okay, okay, fine. So if you look at the systematic review, it actually says that there is a very modest increase in overall survival compared to the adverse effects potentially during somebody who has who is probably going to take it for a long time. So in this patient, I would not, but then that's the standard practice with most urologists who do combine androgen blockade. So it's a very modest or very minimal survival, especially while adding bicalutamide to LHRH agonist. But the point is taken. Dr. Vijay Karan, are you there? Can we discuss the systemic therapy options for this patient? Would you also add anything more than non-steroidal anti-androgens? Would you add dosi, abiraterone, or enzalutamide in this patient?
Yes, yes, sir. So in such a situation where there's a metastatic hormone sensitive and low volume disease, so a couple of things that you need to consider before you think of systemic therapy. One thing is the volume of metastasis that is there. The second thing is age and fitness of the patient, and also the toxicity. So in this patient with only CAD with cardiac toxicity, I would try and avoid abiraterone. However, in patients with cardiac toxicity, the only two systemic options that are recommended are enzalutamide and the new apalutamide that has come up. But in this situation, because he's 60 and he's physically fit, only with a history of CAD 3 years back, I think he'd be good enough to tolerate docetaxel. So I would go ahead with docetaxel along with the ADT, 6 cycles of docetaxel for him.
Are you going to start upfront, or how long from the start of hormones would you consider starting this drug?
There are two ways to go about it. So first thing, you can give 2 to 3 months of ADT and then start docetaxel. But in our practice here, I would start docetaxel at the beginning itself, as at the point of diagnosis along with ADT.
Okay, okay. So in Stampede, they wait. The time for recruitment is up to 120 days from starting ADT.
Yes,
I think fairly good enough. You can wait up to 3 months and then
3
start on the molecule of your choice. So you have justified using docetaxel. Does somebody in the panel refute with Karan's decision?
One
So
thing
you all
is,
agree to adding docetaxel in this patient. Okay. So the
This is
point,
probably the best time we can ever give docetaxel. Maybe 4 years later, 3 years later, he may not be as well as he is right now. So
the charted data is basically mostly on the high volume disease rather than the low volume disease. So maybe the low volume diseases, the better option would be enzalutamide for this
But,
particular patient.
Sir, for that in Stampede trial though, they have taken
Stampede has both
docetaxel.
the options.
So yeah, it has both low volume, high volume, and even locally advanced. But you're right. In high volume, we would prefer first line docetaxel. In low volume, we would rather do abiraterone. Yeah, that's the recommendation.
Maybe this particular patient enzalutamide, as you said, abiraterone will cause higher risk of diabetes or cardiac disease.
yeah, life was
but
simple
in
about
India,
10 years back.
enzalutamide and apalutamide cost is an issue, sir, because we have to continue indefinitely.
Agreed.
So cost-wise, also, if you see docetaxel is most ideal, we can give 6 cycles and stop.
Now, for argument's sake, for this patient, he is low volume disease. So enzalutamide is also an equally good option in this patient, considering that we have, ARCHES and Enzamet trial.
Enzamet.
Yeah. Next is this patient actually had docetaxel. He's a 2018 patient. He had 6 cycles of docetaxel, and the PSA nadir that he achieved was 1.1. And on responsive evaluation PSMA scan, there was significant reduction in all the sites. Now, would you consider any local therapy options? Can Dr. Sanjukta take this one? Hi, Dr. Sanjukta.
Yeah. This patient, though it is metastatic disease upfront, but he has responded well to the anti-androgen therapies, and now I will consider going for palliative RT to this patient.
He has no symptoms at this point, so we are not looking at palliation. So for somebody who has already achieved fairly good response with docetaxel and LHRH agonist, would you still consider local therapy as an option?
Yeah, I'll go for local therapy.
Okay. What form of local therapy? Surgery or RT?
So I'll go for RT.
You will go for RT. What dose would you choose, madam, for this patient?
Say moderate hypofractionation, I will go for.
Suggest a dose.
It's like 40-50 gain, 20 fractions.
Okay, madam. Okay, so you'll choose anywhere between 40 and 50 in 20 fractions. Okay, so now we just looking at those, or there are certain patients who will actually benefit with local therapy as per the standard Stampede trial. So we should notice that not everyone gets overall survival. It's only for a selected group of patients that overall survival happens. Now, if you look for a low burden patient, yes, it favors radiation, and also looks like, you know, somebody who is fit, we should be considering a daily dose of radiation instead of using a weekly dose of radiation. So for this patient, if we are choosing radiation, I think we would choose a 55 and 20 rather than doing a 6 gray single weekly 6 gray dose. Also, we should notice that patients who have actually received docetaxel benefit more with radiation. Those who have soft tissue disease like nodal disease also benefit with radiation. I'll take Dr. Sanjukta's point. We should consider radiation for this patient and probably offer him 55 and 20 according to Stampede trial. But then
I have a question. I'm like, wouldn't have been considered radiation in the beginning itself? Considering it as an oligometastatic disease, only a nodal, only a parietic lymph node.
I think the question is here for you, Vinay. You should start off answering. Anybody who votes for a sort of curative RT in this case, because it's a very low nodal burden, has achieved very good response, has had docetaxel, very, very oligometastatic. What would you do, Vinay, if this patient comes to you? Finances is not an issue as well.
I'll take up this question. See, we do not have any consensus guidelines to say, like when it is a nodal burden, to go ahead with a definitive radiotherapy. We really do not have a consensus on that. When we talk about all this extrapolated data from the Stampede, where we are saying that the low metastatic burden would have a definite good overall survival when we add radiotherapy, then definitely we can add radiotherapy as the definitive intent. I'm like with an intent to increase their overall survival. But when we go for a dose per fraction, then probably irradiating a parietic and a pelvic lymph node separately with a different dosing schedules, I'm really not comfortable with it.
I take the point, Vinay. So
I would choose. Sorry.
Go ahead, Vinay.
You were saying something?
Sorry, please go ahead. Yeah. What would you choose for this patient?
So when we have parietic and a pelvic lymph node with a prostate, all three to be taken for a hyperfractionated radiotherapy, when we interpolate data from Stampede, then probably we don't have an evidences, because Stampede has included all the patients who had nodal burden, bone disease of the bone, especially the spine, the axial skeleton. So in that way, we don't have a consensus. Then probably it is individual, one-to-one basis. Probably if the patient is willing and if we are, then probably definitely we can consider them for radiotherapy.
Okay, so you will not even give docetaxel and give prostate directed RT, is it?
Docetaxel where?
No, will you give docetaxel or just give him hormones and RT?
I would prefer only hormones and radiotherapy rather than docetaxel.
Okay, only to the prostate.
Only to the prostate.
Does somebody agree with Vinay's care plan for this patient?
So this patient is actually a low oligometastatic disease.
Yeah.
Considering there is a single parietic lymph node. Actually, there is a data on like the STORM trial, which actually talks about the SBRT to limited metastatic disease. Like they say that there is even a consensus on Italian guidelines, who says that less than 3 nodes or 3 bone mets, if it is present, we can still go ahead with the SBRT. And the trials actually says that your systemic ADT free survival would be a bit longer, like almost near. So that would be one. It's not I would not say it's a phase 3 data, but still it is a data which tells us that SBRT is still an option in this particular patient.
I think fantastic. That is the answer. You can actually justify by radiating all these sites. In fact, this patient, when he was discussed in our tumor board, I voted for 55 and 20 to the GTV and 45 and 25 to the parietic pelvis but nobody actually agreed to this.
No, Dr. Madhu, you took me wrong. I am also completely in irradiating all the sites.
Oh, you wanted to
Madhu,
edit
Madhu,
all the
yeah.
sites.
Yes.
Okay.
Madhu,
What
would
I was
like
trying to
step
tell
in
is
here.
probably if we have a dose fractionation similar to that of a Stampede, then probably I'm not into it.
Okay. Dr. Sridhar?
Yeah. So there are 2-3 points here. Just can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So yeah, number one, that is an low volume oligometastatic sites. It's only the limited number of one. Yeah, there is, like when we're still talking about a palliative in the case of a low volume prostate cancers, that probably requires a little bit of definition changes. That is what I prefer to do it. And I'm happy to hear that, okay, they like irradiating all the sites is one of the best way to do it. We have our own paper, like which is published two years back in Astro. Irradiating the prostate and all the metastatic site as much as possible is a better idea, and actually definitely shows a survival advantage. Stampede has a variable numbers, and the normal radiation versus SBRT. Probably the SBRT to the prostate and the all metastatic site as much as possible, along with any of the either abiraterone or enzalutamide, does not matter. Or if, as long as you are using the docetaxel, probably the timing should be in such a way that 3 months or in the middle or completion of the chemotherapy may be a better way. So that is just a comment.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. So
What I was trying to convey, Dr. Madhu, is I would have considered for radiotherapy in the beginning only with hormone.
with
That was my
hormones.
intent.
Point taken. Yeah. So
And Madhu, one point also, you have 5 minutes only.
yes, sir. Almost through. Yeah. So would you actually? This patient was not offered RT at all in our tumor board, and he just continued on observation. Would you consider some maintenance systemic therapy or wait until progression? Anybody, Prahlad?
Maintenance systemic therapy in the form of
Add bicalutamide or add any other molecule like abiraterone and put him on maintenance?
Yeah, definitely.
You would consider
inducing rapid hormone resistance. So,
okay. So if we are going to
I would have
consider
voted strongly for RT to all the sites.
all the sites. Okay, cool then. See, in Arches and Enzamet trial, patients who had moved on to enzalutamide after docetaxel had lot of CVAs and CADs. So maintenance systemic therapy is not a great idea, especially in somebody who has comorbidities, but it can always be done. And he had an oligoprogression in 2 sites. Dr. Prahlad, would you consider RT to oligoprogressive sites if you have not radiated him earlier?
So treating only oligoprogressive sites, definitely, at least now, for sure.
Okay.
Prostate and the paralytic lymph node.
Yeah, we have
pelvic nodes were also positive earlier, right?
Earlier, but not now.
Okay.
It's only the prostate and the parietic node which has actually progressed. And the PSA is still quite low. It's only 2.2.
Yeah,
I still consider.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We did radiate both the sides. Yeah, for this patient, he did get both the sides, RT, PALA-T, and then he was started on abiraterone. So that's the case 1. We'll move on to case 2. 70 agriculturist presented with urinary obstruction, had a PSA of 88, TURP done, and also underwent orchidectomy. MRI pelvis shows 2 Mets. He also had a PSMA PET scan, shows limited metastasis, only 4 numbers. Dr. Sanjukta, would you just wait after orchidectomy, or would you consider some steroidal anti-androgens like abiraterone and enzalutamide?
Well, I will go for it's a oligomite disease, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I will wait for a few months, 2 to 3 months before going for any therapy.
Any therapies, okay. But we have survival data from all that we have discussed, Latitude, Enzamet, all of them shows actually survival data. Would you not consider?
I'll consider bicalutamide because he has already undergone orchidectomy. You can start bicalutamide for 2 to 3 months, then for RT, I would go for RT.
You will go for RT to prostate or all sides?
All sides, because oligomet we can treat like as a radical RT, oligomet disease. So I will go for all sides.
Okay, okay, ma'am. So I'll
With
move on to the
precision
next.
radiotherapy technique.
Yeah, Venkat, local therapy for this gentleman.
Yeah, this patient is actually had a limited oligometastasis. So even though you have started on abiraterone for this particular patient, we can give the local radiation therapy for this particular patient. So
Okay.
the recent trial of the PEACE-1 trial, which is actually results come out, which compared the standard of care RT versus standard of care abiraterone plus RT, which actually showed that the combination therapy had a higher radiological progression-free survival for almost like more than 2 years. So there is definitely a benefit of adding radiation, abiraterone, even though this particular patient had orchidectomy in this particular group.
Yeah, hormonal management with LHRH agonist or orchidectomy is all the same. So you would consider
I would
local
consider
therapy.
it local therapy, definitely, yes.
Great, great. And Vinay, again, so you voted
Dr.
for
Madhu?
Yes, ma'am. Last slide.
Yes, yes, sure.
Metastasis.
I would irradiate all sides.
Now, all panelists, all Mets SBRT, put up your hands.
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Fine. Again, very, very debatable. So I think it's okay to do all Mets SBRT, but I think wait and watch is also a reasonable option since we don't have such hard and fast data. For completion's sake, very quick question to Vijay Karan. Would you take care of bone health in hormone-sensitive metastatic prostate?
Yes, sir, I would definitely consider it. However, whatever data is there, both the zoledonic acid and denosumab, the trials have been in metastatic acid-resistant prostate cancer. In that specific setting, only they have shown that the skeletal-related events are delayed. But nevertheless, in this patient, exactly, especially when there's a 70-year-old man with bone mets, I would definitely start him on zoledonic acid. Whether monthly or 3 monthly, either way is equally beneficial.
Okay.
So I would prefer zoledonic acid.
Okay. If it is only for the sake of bone health, yearly ones is also good enough in a sensitive prostate. How frequently do we do PSA tests? Monthly, 3 monthly?
3 monthly, sir.
3 monthly.
For sure.
Any other quality of life measures that you are actually concerned about in these patients, Karan?
In terms of if they're receiving hormones, you mean? Sir?
Yeah, and receiving hormones.
No, sir, I don't think so. Other than bone health, I would not consider anything else.
Okay,
So
I think
with
sexual
the
health.
comorbidities and monitoring cardiac, if you're using abiraterone and all those things are there, but once the patient is fit and you have decided to start them already on whatever systemic therapy that we choose, other than PSA and taking care of the bone health, I don't think anything else I would like to monitor.
Okay, I always feel heart and bone are always looked after. It's obesity, sexual healthcare, and other things also add up to the quality of life of these patients.
Hot flushes.
Thanks so much.
extremely
Thanks for the yeah, Prahlad.
So, hot flushes are very troublesome. Invariably, they're the most common complaint.
Common complaints. Correct. Okay, thank you, organizers, and thanks so much, panelists, for active participation. I hope we've done justice in the last half an hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhu.
Now, this is a gentleman who's 69-year-old. He's a known patient of benign prostatic hyperplasia. He has type 2 diabetes mellitus for a few years, has been presenting in the clinic of the urologist for about last 8 months with LUTS. They have the doctor there has done a digital rectal examination and has found a hard nodular prostate. Yeah. So, what do you do now? Anyone who wants to take the Dr. Shantling, what would be your next choice at this point of time?
Serum PSA?
Oh, well, you answered me. So here is his PSA. Is 18 nanogram per ml.
MRI pelvis.
Pardon?
MRI of the pelvis, sir. MRI of the prostate.
Yes. So yeah. So I would thought so that somebody will ask for an MRI pelvis, but the patient is actually a real patient who has been treated in a particular way. So I will tell you what happened. This is what they did, and this is what they found.
Oh, Okay.
So yeah, so this is a classic case of a solitary bone mets. I mean, it's not a real solitary, but for the time being, let us assume it's solitary. And it's asymptomatic. And instead of doing a bone mets MRI, they actually did this whole body PSMA scan. And there is uptake in the prostate, and there is uptake in L4 and L5, L3. What would be your next thing to do again?
Biopsy to be done.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
So, okay. Now, there is always a question of whether you should do a biopsy first or an MRI first. And what would be your choice, Dr. Sharath? Would you do a situation like this? Would you do a biopsy first or MRI first?
I will do a biopsy first.
Suppose this patient was not a metastatic patient, then would your sequence be different?
No, no, I would still go with the biopsy. Only thing here would be the spinal MRI because of the spinal cord compression kind of a situation, what you are showing in that.
Now, suppose this patient is not a metastatic patient. Then would you do a biopsy first or a
patient also? I would have gone for biopsy first.
Now, the problem with doing a biopsy first is that it subsequently alters your interpretation of the MRI.
Yes.
So therefore, an MRI should always be done first before you hit the prostate with the biopsy needle. But as I told you, this patient was being treated elsewhere, and I have just produced what has been done to the patient. However, you will see this is what happens in many places. Well, for this particular patient, maybe it's all right because it's a metastatic patient and knowing the local stage in MRI is not that important. But otherwise, in a patient who has got a localized tumor only and non-metastatic, it's always a good idea to do the MRI first and then hit the needle with the biopsy. What else would you do? Now, okay. Now you tell me, Dr. Shantling,
yes,
how would you describe this patient? Is it
so this would be
patient, oligometastatic patient, or metastatic patient?
So it will be an oligometastatic patient.
Anybody who is not willing to agree with this description of being an oligometastatic?
Maybe seeing at the scans, or maybe prostate also looks very big. So I think it will be a locally advanced plus oligometastatic.
Okay, so now once a patient is metastatic, being whether it's a locally advanced or locally small, doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter. However, I go by your assessment of calling this as an oligometastatic. The question is that, how do you define oligometastatic? I mean, is there definition for? I will request this question to. Just a minute. I will.
Can I come in?
I will request this question to Dr. Naveen. How would you define an oligometastatic?
This oligometastasis, if you're considering only it as if you take only as a bone metastasis, any metastasis of bone, 4 or more, is supposed to be oligometastasis, and more so if it is within the vertebral bodies. If it is outside the vertebral bodies or in the pelvis or with the visceral metastasis, again it becomes it doesn't fit into oligometastasis if you go only by radiological wise.
Okay. Anybody else who is willing to differ from this definition of oligometastasis from what Dr. Naveen has told?
No. Oligometastasis means, first of all, because there are so many residents and there are so many students, I want to give a clear-cut definition about this, because oligo means very few metastatic sites which are there. And if you look at any of these series of published series or any of these data, most of the data says it should be confined to any of those organs.
So, Dr. Ravi Shankar, to make your job easy, I have given this particular panel.
Yeah, either it should be less than 5 or less than 3.
There are no clear-cut definition of what is oligometastasis.
So exactly that is the reason I said. Sorry to interfere, Ravi. That's exactly I said when it comes to bone itself, because in this particular case.
Yes, I get your point. Definitely, I get your point. Yeah. You basically confined it to a bone oligometastasis. I agree with you. I agree with you completely. So, however, overall the oligometastasis definition, a lot of people have limited it to bone. A lot of people have gone beyond bone into nodes, and the number is also very much variable. However, most of the people would agree that beyond 5 is not to be considered as a oligometastatic. And the mention that you made about spine is very important, because subsequently we'll see how they have actually categorized them into low and the high risk depending on the location of the area. And of course, one should make a difference between oligometastasis and oligoprogression. Now, as I told you that the node versus bone, that's a difference one has to make. Though the clarity is still not there whether you should always consider bone or node, but there are papers which have taken node also as a part of oligometastasis. In your practice, and I'm asking this question to Dr. Vishweshwar, how many times you see patients who are, what percentage of your patients are having oligometastatic disease? Dr. Vishweshwar? Not there. Dr. Shamsundar? Dr. Shamsundar from Kidwai? Anybody else can take this question. In your practice, what sort of numbers, 10%, 15% patients who are oligometastatic?
Sir, in the era of PSMA PET scan, we are now.
Good question. Yes, wonderful. Tell me. Tell me.
In the era of PSMA PET scan, now we are frequently seeing oligometastatic disease. Maybe just a guess kind of thing, around 20 to 30% I see oligometastatic disease of prostate.
Good. So this number can never be agreed upon because we really don't have any.
Again, the problem is again with this new data coming in about this oligometastatic where we can give radiation. So that
I will come to that. I will come to that. But I'm just asking you about
that, because
I will come to that,
we
doctor.
are seeing a lot of cases. So that could be the reason why, because otherwise previously they would all go, we would never see them as radiation oncologists. Like,
okay, so I will tell you my experience. I work very closely with the city's largest urology center. They do the largest number of prostate patients in the city. It's a huge number actually, I see. In my experience, I will put something in the range of, because this oligometastatic patient, they come to us subsequently without getting for surgery. And of course, all the things about the PSMA PET scan and everything applies. I would say that it is in the range of 10 to 15%. However, you should not take this word as a gospel, because in everyone's practice, this is going to vary. But what is most important is that it's a significant number for which we have to be ready as to with our knowledge and how to treat them. But yes, as you rightly said, it is becoming more and more common because we have found a way to treat. Now, at this point, any other imaging that you would have asked for this patient? Anything else you would ask? Anybody, Dr. Vishweshwar? But Vishweshwar is not here today, I guess. Any other imaging?
Okay. Sir has not joined.
Okay. So would you like to take this question?
If anything is there, I can take that.
Sridhar, would you like to take this question in that case?
So, other than the PSMA PET scan is actually the one commonly we use as a one stop.
Yes.
So, and just to go back to that, what Rupesh meant was what we saw, what we thought as high risk prostate cancer, most of them we pick up with the PSMA PET scans oligometastatic, and agree with your 8 to 10% will be truly oligometastatic, 1 or 2 lesions, where PSMA uptake will be, PSMA will pick up these.
So I will just summarize the other imaging that are important, not necessarily in this particular patient because it's already metastatic. A multiparametric MRI is a very, very vital thing all prostate cancer patients, which essentially means a high resolution T2 where it appears hypointense, a differential weighted image with a high B value of more than 1500 or so, a 3-dimensional T1 contrast image. And in this particular patient, we'll definitely go for a spine MRI. So these are the few things which I have for some reason forgotten to write here. A spine MRI is must in this particular patient. Apart from that, PSMA PET of course has been done and it's the thing to go for now. Other PET scans like 11F choline and 11C methionine has actually been approved by the FDA, but for various reasons they are not in practice. One more thing we often tend to ignore is 18FDG is also a useful thing if it's a dedifferentiated. For example, a patient who's having a very, very low PSA and a very high glycemic rate. Sometimes PSMA can be not so avid, but the FDG can be of value. Now, what are the treatment options for this patient? I have taken up half the time in discussing the presentation and the diagnosis. What kind of treatment options would you offer to this? So, Dr. Shantling, of the list that the cafeteria list that I provided here, what would you think is your appropriate treatment for this patient? Or
So
any of a combination?
I would be selecting systemic therapy, RT to prostate.
Okay.
Bit like not sure on RT to metastatic side.
Okay. So you have disagreed with this RT to metastatic. You want to give RT to prostate?
Not totally disagreed, but like to discuss about the plus or minus about that.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would prefer RT to prostate to metastatic site along with systemic therapy, hormonal therapy, basically.
Okay, sure.
This would be
yes, the systemic therapy, the previous discussion that I was listening to was very, very illuminating about the use of systemic therapy in this kind of patients. I am not going to go into the detail. I will keep the systemic therapy discussion for the timing completely aside. But yes, I agree. This patient will also require systemic therapy, whether it's hormones, enzalutamide, whether it's a testosterone. I will not go into the discussion, but some systemic therapy. Yeah. So the difference in opinion here is basically whether to give only RT to prostate versus RT to metastatic site alone. That's the question. What kind of dosages will you give? Dr. Shantling wanted to give only radiation to the prostate. So from this or any other dose, I have just written 4 out of my random wish before I was leaving hospital. But anything else you want to add to this? What sort of dose would you choose when you're giving RT to the prostate alone?
So I would be going for 55 and 20.
Okay. Anybody else has got a different idea? Because 55 and 20 is slightly on the lower side, and if you're going to treat only the prostate, because oligometallic disease is a low-risk disease, and you expect to be...
If it is only to the prostate, I will go for 70 grain 25 fraction. Minimum dose of 70 grain is what I mean. And 55 grain 20 also is acceptable. But again, if you are saying it's only to the prostate, then anywhere between 70 to 80. I'll prefer 70 and 35.
Okay. Anybody else will go ahead then that?
If we go by Stampede trial protocol, 36.
So tell me what you will do. I am not asking you to be an author. I'm telling you what will you do in your clinic. You have just passed out. I told you the presentation is for people who have just passed out yesterday and seeing a patient in the clinic today. You tell me what you do.
55 and 20 will be
55 and 20. So we have 2 choices.
I would go with systemic therapy first and then treat with SBRT to both the sides.
Yeah, systemic therapy is given. Systemic therapy is definitely given.
SBRT to both the sides.
Both the sides. So what sort of dosage would you go for a 36 and 6?
37 in 5 fractions.
36. Okay, fair enough. I mean, I'm just giving a ballpark.
25 to 30 gray.
Now, the core question is that whether there is any point going aggressive with the local treatment in a patient who is already metastatic. That is a more fundamental question rather than splitting here on the dosages. And let me try to tell you what kind of data exists for that. Now, non-randomized data has been there for a long time. And if you see, the existing data does not, most of the published papers actually do not distinguish whether it was a radiation that was given or surgery was done. There's one big CR data propensity match analysis, which did show significant improvement in outcome with both radical prostatectomy as well as radiation. And RT is slightly better only in the favorable patients. Now, these are phase 2 data, so you have to take them with whatever pinch of salt that you have to do. I'm sorry, these are retrospective, not phase 2 even. And there is another paper also, which just a minute. Yeah. There is also another paper which was from National Cancer Database Analysis, where it did show that propensity match analysis was not significant improvement, but only in the favorable patients. On the other hand, there is another trial which was basically a radical prostatectomy done in oligometastatic patient with a case control study, where it did not show any improvement with the addition of surgery. I mean, surgery or radiation, I'm just talking about the local treatment. This is bound to be diverse. This outcome is bound to be diverse because of the nature of the data. But it is important to show that even before the trials came out, there has always been some amount of interest in treating these oligometastatic patients in a more aggressive manner. What about randomized data? This is the HORADS trial, which actually randomized them into local treatment versus only ADT versus ADT and radiotherapy. And there was no overall survival benefit of adding radiation. And here we are. You can see the forest curve. Practically all the subgroups are straddling the unity. There seems to be no advantage of adding radiation. There was some degree of benefit of time to progression, but that's about it. What do you have to say about this? Why do you think that even though all of us agreed to give some sort of local radiation to prostate, and there is some kind of a old data, the non-randomized data that shows that there is an advantage of adding, why do you think this thing happened? Why do you think that HORADS trial actually did not show? It is a randomized trial. It went against whatever your common perception of the disease would be. How did it happen? Anyone has got any idea?
Maybe most of the patients had high metastatic burden for which they did not
So
respond.
here we come here. Look at this. There are patients who even had more than 15 sites, 5 to 15 sites. Yeah. So, and in that also, the patients who had less number of metastases actually had better outcome, even though it is not significant because of a lot of other things. And this trial actually used 70 gray in 35 fractions. Now, it is not necessarily inferior because it had given 70 gray in 35 fractions. It is inferior because the patients were not chosen properly. So therefore, the key to taking up these patients for any form of local therapy, and in this context, we're talking about radiation, is to be able to choose your patients properly and not every patient. Other trial, which has subsequently, influenced our treatment, is the STAMPEDE trial. Now, STAMPEDE has got multiple arms. Sometimes, I completely lose track of how many arms STAMPEDE has got and when they are publishing which arm. However, this arm basically looked at the addition of radiation to the systemic therapy, both hormones as well as docetaxel. The volume was defined as per the charted trial, which is basically no visceral metastasis, less than 5 lesions, and no more than 1 lesion beyond the pelvis and the vertebral body. So beyond the pelvis and the vertebral body is seen as something bad, and therefore more than 1 lesion in beyond pelvis and the vertebral body is taken as a non-oligometastatic disease. So this is where the first speaker who was trying to define the oligometastatic disease, that comes into picture here. That even with the number of disease that you have, you should be very, very careful. That doesn't mean that STAMPEDE is a final authority, final say, but what is important is to exercise caution to choose your oligometastatic. And here you are. These are your outcomes. You have better overall survival. You have better failure-free survival is there. So the STAMPEDE trial suggested that local EBRT should be considered in MPC, and they advised a moderate use. They did not say that you have to go up to 70 gray or things like that. And it included the pelvis. Now, there was another arm in the STAMPEDE which actually had 36 and 6. There was no way to tell which one is better, whether 36 is better or 55 and 20 is better. And most important key is that select your patients with a low volume disease. In this particular trial, they had defined the charted trial definition, which I will explain to you later. So far so good. I think we have all agreed, and this is a panel discussion where nobody is disagreeing with each other. This is very rare. I'm throwing this in the picture. Now, if this patient had come to you differently, like this is the prostate, and here is the metastasis, how many people would now limit your radiation only to the prostate and not address the metastasis? Would Dr. Naveen take this question?
Yeah, probably. I think it will be difficult to treat both the sites because your rectal dose will be very high. And
so in the previous discussion, I heard a lot of people giving an opinion that they will treat all the metastatic sites along with the prostate in a situation like this. What is your opinion about that? Anybody else has got a different opinion? Who would like to treat both the metastatic sites as well as the prostate? Anybody else?
Speaking. Okay. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. Hello. Tell me, what's your opinion?
Yeah, Rupesh or Saurabh, if nobody is taking, I'll take that. Yeah, I prefer. Depending on the number of metastatic sites, probably the cutoff what we took in is a 5 in the past. And this particular patient, prostate plus the area of bone mets can be treated easily with SBRT without any problem to the rectum.
Fair. I think I also agree with that. So although the direction in this is not very clear, but it is a common practice to treat patients, both the primary as well as the metastatic site, when the metastatic site is either close to the tumor bearing area so that your treatment plan is not very complicated, or you have a reason to treat the metastatic site for other clinical reasons. Now, there are quite a few papers are there, and I want to focus on this Popster paper, which is a bit of an old paper. It came out in 2014, if I'm not wrong. And one of the first papers to use 20 gray in a single fraction. They had only 30 patients. It was a pilot trial. Only 30 patients with 50 metastatic sites, including both nodes and primary. And they actually had shown benefit. So although the level of evidence is not very high, but it is kind of intuitive to offer patients radiation to the prostate as well as spines, lesions which are painful, which are weight bearing, which are lytic, and therefore has a risk of fracture and subsequent complications from that. Patients with spinal metastasis, obviously, and femoral head and neck where there is risk of fracture or cord compression. In that case, definitely, even though you, as per the Stampede, you don't have to, but looking at these metastatic sites independently, one should add.
Dr. Kaushik, try to summarize in 5
My
minutes.
last slide here is that, so therefore the question of high volume versus low volume is very, very important. There are multiple definitions, and Chartered trial has been actually the same definition has been carried over for the Stampede trial as well as the GATEC trial, which basically tells you that if it is more than 4 metastases, one or more outside the vertebral bodies and pelvis or visceral, that is external metastasis, they should be considered as high volume and therefore not qualifying for any aggressive local prosthetic radiation. Now, I will actually now show you the patient whom we had, and this is the patient. I have cheated you by selectively showing the scans to prove whatever I wanted to prove. So in this real patient, all that we did was we treated this bone, which was actually having compression, and sent this patient away for systemic therapy. Thank you very much. I have finished in time.
Thank you.
Right in time for
Thank you. Sir, but this patient qualifies for low metastatic burden prostate cancer.
I have not shown you the full images. The patient had a lot of, I will show you just a minute, since you asked this question. Let us go back to the first slide.
Good discussion. Yeah, it qualifies.
Look at the notes.
Yeah.
Rupesh.
Yes, sir.
Look at the nose, Rupesh. So we did not do anything apart from giving palliative verdict to one of the spine, which was painful, and send this patient away for systemic therapy.
So the take-home message is better to take the entire patient as a whole before we
No,
decide.
I know that. I have just chosen slides to show you what kind of situation.
Yes, sir.
So thank you very much for all
Thank you, sir.
the participation
Thank
that
you.
you have done.
Thank you.
Anyone
Thank
can
you,
wrap
Kaushik.
up my discussion. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all panelists and the speaker. That was a wonderful discussion actually. Went like